Saris of The Athletic, and I really like his stuff, came out with a story last week that caught everybody's attention.
And that was Saris of the... Okay.
Saris, yeah. And so Baseball Savant, which has been around for a long time, has basically been one of those places where you can go to get advanced stats for baseball. Mm-hmm. Okay, and he talked in his article about the different types of stats that have come along in the past 20-odd years, PitchX and TrackMan, and so what they...
Well, the Pitch FX system was installed, so that's why we have pitch velocity tracked publicly for every pitcher. That's why we can see that since 2006, the league average four-seam fastball has gone up by like 2.8 miles an hour.
Right. So that point, and it's a really good one to make, is that when people become aware of stats and advanced stats, all of a sudden players start trying to play to it, going, "Oh, I'm only throwing 95. I should see if I can't throw 97."
Right. And you look at this for another example of it. Look at this. We added the TrackMan's radar-based system in 2015. Does that let us do? It lets us track spin rate. Guess what's gone up every single year since that statistic was introduced? Spin rate.
I think Seth Lugo has made a career out of the spin rate.
Right, and we're seeing this. We can see that since 2020 when we put an optical player in ball tracking, we can see exit velocities and launch angles have gone up. So our ability to track all of these different aspects of the game in a way and quantify pieces of data, where before you could just say a guy swung hard, now we really know how hard a guy is swinging and whether or not that's actually impressive.
Well, it's not even that. They've quantified for me, and here's what I really like is baseball is giving us the bat speed measured at the sweet spot. And so actually quantify the sweet spot, right? It's about 6 inches from the head of the bat. I don't think I ever knew exactly what that was. It's near the end of the bat. I'm not really sure where. And at contact, and the closest point to contact for a miss. And so they came up with a bunch of charts in this article that I think are really cool. Are really, really cool. So the first little square is, how is bat speed captured? Statcast matches the bat speed at the sweet spot of the bat, approximately 6 inches. A batter's average bat speed is the average of his top 90% of his swings. Okay, so we can't take every swing. We know there's going to be some bad swings, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
That way, we eliminate a lot of the ones where a guy gets fooled and makes a really weak swing, because that should be something that's credited to the pitcher, which we'll see later.
Exactly.
But then that way you eliminate all those, and you just have the ones that are left that show just how does he generally swing. And I think we were saying that the average swing speed is about 72
That's what they said. So the
hour.
article says 72 miles an hour. So there's your baseline, right? So anybody who's faster than that is a little above average. And so, but the weird thing is that a fast swing is at 75 miles an hour plus. That's only 3 miles faster than 72, which is the average.
Right, which now you might think sounds strange, but you have to think about the range that these numbers are working with in here, and how difficult it is to get your average swing speed up by 1 mile an hour. The difference between 72 and 75, it's like having a 250 hitter and a 300 hitter. It's only 50 percentage points. It can't be that. It's a lot.
It's a lot.
And it's a big difference here. So approximately about 25% of major leaguers swing at 75 miles an hour plus.
Of the swings. It's not the players.
It's just the
swings.
swings.
So basically 75% of the swings are not fast swings. Mm-hmm. And they're fooled, or they didn't, they're not as accomplished a player, and they don't have that ability. And so there are a lot more things in here that I think are very interesting in terms of squaring up a ball. At least a swing attains 80% of exit velocity. It counts as a squared up swing.
Right. So that means if your swing is within 80% of the exit velocity, which is actually a bigger gap than you think, and you really have to hit a ball crazy hard to not have it squared up and have it be hit out of the park most of the time.
And then they came up with something called blasts. And I had a little trouble with this at first because they were talking about it during games last week.
Right. You're going to start hearing these terms used on broadcasts and stuff. I think especially this last one we're going to go over here in a little bit. That's going to get used
a blasted swing is one that is squared up and has a fast swing. Okay, well, that makes sense, right? So you hit the center, you hit the part of the bat you really want, and you've done it quickly. You would think the ball go far in that situation. Well, a squared up swing doesn't have a bat speed minimum. A blast does.
So that's the big difference. So that means a guy like typically Luis Arraez is one of the slowest major league swingers. I think his average is about 62.7 miles an hour on his swings. So he can square up a lot of balls, but he's not going to hit a lot of blasts because he's not going to attain the bat speed to hit balls like that at that speed.
He's also the 2-time batting championship, one in each league, and even this year, in what you might think is a down year, is still batting over 300.
So what that shows you is that blasts and fast bat speed are not stats that predict being a good hitter. If anything, what's going to show you is it's going to show you how the guys who have the proclivity to driving the ball the most. The people that hit the ball the farthest are going to have the highest bat speeds generally.
And then they came up with the length of the swing, which I think is really interesting. Right? I don't know if I ever really thought about, well, how, I mean, you knew when you saw a guy with a short, abbreviated swing or a long swing, but, like, are some guys prone to longer swings all the time than shorter swings? And the answer is yes.
Yes. I think a guy like Altuve has one of the shortest swings in the major leagues, whereas a guy like Giancarlo Stanton has, I think, the longest swing in the major leagues. So you can kind of see the types of hitters that you are, you'll see that come out in the types of swings that they take.
Right. And so the guys like Stanton have some of the highest exit velocities because he's got a huge swing, and he swings among the fastest in all of Major League Baseball. So when he does it, the ball's going to go a mile. Right. The problem is he misses quite a bit.
And so, if you know what, I think for me, a really good way at looking at how elite a hitter is looking at his ratios of blasts to squaring up. Because a guy that's hitting a lot of blasts and squaring up a high percentage of the time is a really good hitter.
Right.
Because you might have a guy like Stanton who's going to have a ton of blasts, but he's not going to have that many times where he squares up because he doesn't hit the ball that consistently. Whereas you might have a guy like Luis Arias who's going to square up on the ball all the time, but he's not going to hit that many blasts because he's never going to hit the bat speed necessary to drive the ball in that fashion.
It's probably a guy, and I'm pretty sure I saw the stat, like Shohei, right, who has the Goldilocks syndrome of just right. He has enough of the blast and enough of the sweet spots, that he actually is going to drive the ball with power more often than anybody else, and that's what he does.
Now, we have all of these stats for tracking all of the hitters, so what about the pitchers? Well, I think they get the best one, because like we were saying before, bat speed is only calculated by looking at the top 10% of the batter swings. So what do you do with the bottom 10% of the batter swings? Well, like we were saying, that's as much because of good pitching as it is because of good hitting. So a sword is a new stat for pitchers, which I just think is great because it sounds really cool. And
everybody was talking about it last week. Everybody, these swords, like as if you're out there dueling with somebody, which is essentially what they're saying.
Any guy that's got a big arsenal of swords on his side is probably a pitcher that's having a good season. And so
what is it?
It's a swinging strike. So a hitter has to swing at the ball and miss, where the swing is incomplete. So that means it's not a full swing through the zone.
It's like an alligator arm a little bit, right?
And the speed is in the lowest 10% percentile. So basically,
he's fooled.
He's completely fooled. He takes a terrible swing at the ball. That's what a sword is for. So you'll be able to see one that'll tell you if a hitter has a large number of swords in a single season. That means he takes a lot of really bad cuts and gets fooled a lot. I think Kyle Schwarber gets fooled. He has like a ton of swords. I don't know if he's the most in the majors.
Yeah, I don't know who the leader is there. But it's more about the pitchers, right? Because the pitchers now are chasing swords.
Right. Oh, okay. Zach Neto has the most swords.
Okay.
The Angels' Zach Neto.
Right. There's a guy that nobody's even really heard of. So.
Right. And so a pitcher that has a lot of swords, I think that's going to tell you how nasty his stuff is. That's going to tell you how badly he fools hitters. And a pitcher could be very effective without getting a lot of swords. But a guy that gets a lot of swords actually is probably not guaranteed to be effective because it might mean you have really nasty stuff. But if you can't control it, it doesn't matter how good it is. It might not matter. You're going to make the occasional hitter look bad, but you also might walk a ton of guys.
And there's so many obvious things about these, the swing stats that when you think about it, like, oh yeah, it makes sense. So a short, fast swing is the goal, right? Because you want to kind of, have the most efficient swing. But if it's hard to get a fast swing when you have a short swing.
Right.
So you're trying to find that sort of literally the sweet spot between having too short a swing and too long a swing that allows you to hit the ball with the maximum force with the most at the most amount of times.
Right, and so if you go to baseballsavant.mlb.com, you can actually look at the leaderboard for the stat tracking, and there's a couple names that jump out to you. The first is Luis Arias because he leads the major in squared up swing percentage,
which for a guy who swings a little slower doesn't make that much.
No, at 43%. Nobody else is above 40. So think about one. That means he squares up and hits the ball solidly 43% of the time.
That's like Ty Cobb kind of stuff.
And he does that while having nobody's within like 4 miles an hour of his swing that they're tracking. So
and he's the only guy really in the major leagues that can do it this way.
And then a guy that's on the kind of the exact opposite end of that spectrum is Stanton. Because Stanton only squares up 22% of the time. but he's got an average bat speed of 80.6.
By far the highest.
Nobody's above 78.
Right. By far the highest.
And so you have to wonder, who is really, if you're looking at this, who's probably the most elite hitter in baseball right now? Well, it's a New York Yankee by the name of Juan
Soto, right. Because it's a combination of bat speed and efficiency.
He average bat speed of 76.2.
Above average,
with
elite.
a squared up swing of rate of 35.7. So he's among the league leaders in the amount that he's squaring up on the ball while having one of the highest average bat speeds. So that guy's hitting blasts and that telling you that he's driving the ball in a way very few other players are.
And in his case, it's to a degree because he's got I think the most bases on balls in the American League. His fantastic batting eye doesn't have him swinging at pitches that he can't hit as much as other players.
Right, so that's why he's got a higher squared up swing percentage than a guy like Shohei, who will chase pitches a little bit more.
Right, and even Aaron Judge has had quite a few bases on balls this year. He's not that far behind Soto, but he hasn't squared up the ball nearly as much as his teammate. So, although he's been coming on lately in that sense. So I kind of came up with another one watching the games last week, watching players after I read all these articles and saw this stuff, that when a player swings so hard that he ends up on one knee, right? And so there's no stat for that. I call that a collapse, right? Because the guy, he certainly can't hit the ball, and he ends up being so off that he swings hard, ends up on one knee, and it's almost like like he's genuflecting, because he couldn't hit the ball. And I think you could really come up with a stat in and of itself of collapses, because guys do that a lot.
Right. I have to see enough to know if there's a meaningful amount of differences between swords and collapses.
Right.
Kind of encompass the same thing.
Collapses swords?
I don't know.
It's like an old high school English thing,
And Corbin Burns leads the majors right now, just to kind of give people a sense of how often swords happen, with 11 as a starting pitcher. So he's thrown a fair number of innings, and he's only got 11 swords throughout this year. So you're not going to get maybe more than one or two a start as a starter.
I guess before this year you didn't have any swords because they didn't have a stat for it. So.
But if we look at the people that are at the top, it's Corbin Burns, Logan Gilbert, Luis Gil of the New York Yankees.
Gil, yeah.
Luis Severino, Jared Jones, Patrick Sandoval, Aaron Nola, Chris Sale. So, a lot of guys with nasty, nasty stuff are at the top of this list. And I think that's what this is the biggest.
And very good pitch sequencing. Because you need both things. In order to fool a guy, I think, to a degree enough to have him do a sword, he's got to be so fooled that he's like, oh, and he's trying to stop himself, but he can't, and he's swinging, and it's too late, and he ends up with this horribly wimpy little, wave that ends up being called a sword.
And so here's an interesting thing. What's interesting is you can also go to Baseball Savant and look at the squared up percentage rate for the pitchers. So that's going to tell you who's getting hit the worst. And so, not to the surprise of many Met fans, Adrian Hauser is number 2 on this.
Why am I not surprised?
At 35% of the competitive swings that batters take against him, they square up on the ball. That means guys are hitting the ball really well off him. And here's something that's interesting is you see most of the expected guys on this list because it's people that aren't having great seasons. Dakota Hudson, Adrian Hauser, Taijuan Walker. Shocker is number 7, and I think this is a very scary thing for Royals fans because it's Seth Lugo.
Who's gotten off to such a great start this year.
But guys have squared up on him 32.7% of the time when they take a competitive swing. So this might be a way that you can look and go, okay, so that means guys are seeing the ball and they're hitting the ball well. Maybe they're just going at people right now. So that's going to be something I'd keep my eye on. And then you could also look at blast percentage to look at the guys of who are the people that guys are just teeing off on. And that's Alex Wood for the Athletics. He's got 18.7% of the competitive swings that he has are...
He's not fooling anybody.
Oh, yeah, are getting blasts, so people are just crushing against him. So it's just really interesting to look at this, and I think it's a really good way for people to kind of get a sense of... Not necessarily, these aren't going to tell you how good a guy is, but it might tell you how well he's performing, which is interesting that those might be different things.
Yeah, I think this is cool and something we haven't thought about before, and it helps you sort of evaluate players in a way that we haven't done it before. And it also made me think just about, guys like you and me and all that stuff. Like, let's say you go to a Major League Baseball park, right? And you're going to try to hit a home run. And we've seen guys kind of come in and do that, and athletes of different kinds. And, you guys throwing batting practice fastballs to you, and so you try to make your best swing. The problem for most of us, not that I could hit it out, or I don't know if you could or not, but it's hard enough in and of itself. The problem is that after 3 or 4 really good hard swings by somebody like me, I got nothing.
Right.
I can't swing hard anymore. So when you think about these guys doing the home run contest and they take all these, that is such an exhausting thing to do because you're swinging with max effort so many times.
I would so love to have like the fans come in and try to hit the home run just so you could track the average fan bat speed. Like first just overall, and then like where you do it for like their first 5 swings just to see what the drop off would be.
Agreed.
Because there was actually it's funny you bring up the hitting a home run because there's a really interesting video that got put up on it's been on YouTube for years, and it's somebody that's doing a challenge to see if he can train for 30 days to hit a home run in a major league ballpark. And so he goes out. He goes out there the very first time. He's like, I just don't even know if I can kind of like...
I have no idea how far it'll go if I hit it.
And he gets out there the first time, and he's able... Like, one of the first balls he hits, he puts a good charge into, and he gets it out there. And he's like, okay, I might be able to do that. And then, like, he takes, like, 10 swings, and he's exhausted.
Right, he's done.
And he realizes, oh, this is going to be really
because
hard.
you can train yourself, but you have to train yourself to do it in the first 5 swings.
Right, and so he was able to complete the challenge. Like, on the very last day, he was able to hit a home run. And he barely got over the fence. Barely got it over the fence, but he did it. And he's like, I had the luxury of training that the entire time I could only focus on trying to hit a home run because the guy's not trying to get me out. You know, he's just throwing batting practice. So
it's coming now. It's a fastball right at you.
I could only focus on teeing off, and that meant I could put all of my energy into getting better at stamina. And that's the only reason I was able to complete it is because I had 30 days to train and take all of these swings. So I was able to swing at a good pace and velocity for way longer by day 30 than I was on day 1. So I think that would be the hardest thing, that if you just took any random person out there, I think there would be a large number of people that would have the physical strength that if they made good contact on one, they could maybe do it. But they would have to do it in such a small window that would be basically impossible.
I told you this in a recent podcast that there was a story about 75-year-old Hall of Famer Luke Appling, who played shortstop for the White Sox back in the 50s. And he was in an All-Star game at 75, and he, who was not a home runner, hit a home run in an All-Star game at 75 years old. So that makes me think, if this guy can generate enough bat speed, now, he probably took 1 swing. That was it. He hit the ball, he went over the fence, and he didn't have to swing anymore, so he didn't get any more tired because of that. But if that can happen, it makes you think that, okay, if I just got that 1 swing, I could do that. That's the difference between human beings and Major League Baseball players who can do this, repeatedly and
over and over.
The strength, ability to move the bat at that speed is amazing of itself. The ability to sustain it is even more incredible.
Correct. And I think these are going to be stats that we're going to see more and more often. I definitely think that these are going to be stats that teams are going to be looking at to see who's performing well. And I think it's the kind of thing that if your team is looking for a reliever at a deadline, this is a really good thing to look at. Looking at their contact rate, their swing percentage, how are guys hitting the ball off them this season? Because that's going to tell you a lot about how they're performing.
I think it's more telling for the hitters than it is for, like, do you really want to go and get a pitcher who's got a bunch of swords? Like, wow, that's cool.
I might be interested in going after a pitch that, if he's got a career showing that, maybe he doesn't have the stuff, but guys just don't
square it up.
Yep. Because Met fans, as mad as Adrian Hauser is, you want to know who guys have squared up on the least this season in terms of competitive swings? Reed Garrett
on the Mets, and that's why he's having a great season.
16.1 of the competitive swings against.
So there's a correlation there, certainly. Squaring it up in particular.
Right. So what that's telling you is when guys take swings against Reed Garrett, they are really struggling to hit the ball on the sweet part of the bat. So it's telling you good movement is messing them up, and they're not where they think the ball is going to be when they swing the bat. It isn't, and they're not able to hit it with the same frequency and the same power that they would otherwise.
And there's hope on my part that a pitcher like Shota Imanaga for the Cubs, who isn't throwing at 99 miles an hour, 97, who is using guile and experience and pitch speeds and is being very successful doing it, that maybe we can get back to the pitchers, fooling guys to get them without hitting that kind of exit velocity and that kind of squaring up that you see so much today with guys just throwing full on all the time.
Right. And so when you look at Imamanga, he's got pretty good. He's got 22.9% of the competitive swings against him are squared up.
That's
solid.
That's solid, right? Average, a little better than average, right? But
I think what you really see is only 10.3% of this competitive swings against him result in a blast. So guys aren't able to tee up on his stuff. They're not able to really just sit back, know what's coming, and drive the ball. And he has 1 sword this year, so he doesn't have the type of stuff that's going to generate a lot of those.
But that's not important because going back to the days of Greg Maddis, you can pitch to contact or let guys do as long as they never really hit it that solid. You're going to look really good even in your advanced stats because you're not going to have those big exit velocities.
And there are some interesting
barrels.
things because you can look at like the percentage of swings against them that are competitive. So that's going to also tell you an interesting thing. So you have a guy like Yainer Kano who's got 96.5% of the swings against him are competitive. So he's not fooling who's ever coming up. And then if you go and look at the best, who's the best in the majors? Chris Sale, 82.9%.
What a year he's having so far already.
What that tells you is that sometimes he's throwing stuff and guys just don't know what's coming. They think one thing's coming and they just take an awful swing at whatever he's giving.
And that can have as much to do with pitch sequencing as it does to do with actual stuff, by the way. So if you're varying your sequencing enough that the batter, like you say, is totally like, I have no idea what this guy's going to throw me now, that's where you want a hitter, right? If you want to have success. That's where you're going to get the weak contact. You're going to get barrels missed.
Right. And I think that's why you look at this, and it's really interesting to me that if you're looking at the top 10, it's a whole bunch of relievers. Chris Sale and Tarek Skubal.
Right, which is amazing that they're even included in that.
They're in the top of the...
Because when you're a relief pitcher and you don't have to pitch 5, 6, 7, 8 more innings, you can go full out for the inning or two that you might have and give it your best stuff because you're out of the game in an inning or two.
Right. That, to me, what that's telling me is that those two guys are some of the toughest starting pitchers in Major League Baseball right now.
Let's see if they can sustain that through the entire season. But
we can track it.
It's a fun new toy.